Started. We're calling this meeting of the Planning Commission September 25th, 2023 at 6 o'clock. Call it to order. Can we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Engelke.
Here.
Commissioner Ware. Absent. Okay. Commissioner Egner.
Here.
Commissioner Vidal. Commissioner Stokes.
Here.
Commissioner Kirkley.
Here.
Commissioner Mercer.
Here.
Commissioner McGann. Here.
All right, so if everyone will stand, we'll have our Pledge of Allegiance. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I hope all the commissioners and staff are doing well today. I hope that y'all had, that the commissioners had a chance to look over the minutes from our previous meeting. If we have any discussion, or do we have a motion?
I make a motion, we approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Second.
We have a motion to, and a second. Do we have any discussion? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Ware is absent. Commissioner Egner.
Aye.
Commissioner Vidal.
Here.
Commissioner Stokes.
Yes.
Commissioner Kirkley.
Yes.
Commissioner Mercer.
Yes.
Commissioner McGann. Yes. Motion passes.
All right, thank you. All right, so we're going to move on to old business, case number 2023-22. It's a request for a design exception from Article 13, Item K of the City Zone Ordinance for lots 121 through 127 of the River Oaks Section C subdivision. The request is to allow for garage-forward designs in those lots only. Is the applicant here today? Okay, so I'll turn this over to staff for the report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Commissioners. Just a reminder to those that may have come in or whatever, we do have a sign-in sheet in the back. If you could sign in with some applicable communication data there, whatever, that would be great for the minutes. And there is also some extra packets on a chair back there that would have all the cases for tonight's meeting and some extra agendas. So thank you on that. Next slide, please. So what we've got here is, this is just an excerpt from the city zoning ordinance on the architectural standards, lays out the purpose, talks about the purpose of the standards is to make certain that the exterior of all new construction and buildings are of a high quality, long lasting and sustainable within the city. Item 2 there, standards are intended to ensure architectural appropriateness for buildings in newly developing areas, which that's the instance that we have here tonight. Number 3, the standards are intended to enhance the visual aspect and livability of the entire city. Next slide. So this is actually about the design standards pertaining to single-family residential zoning districts. And I wanted to read, let's see, it's like number 1. To ensure architectural compatibility with homes in the immediate vicinity of the building site, building design shall be keeping with the design patterns and architectural features that exist in the immediate vicinity. And then letter A there is the immediate vicinity shall include an area within the same zoning district and a 500 feet radius, or 500 foot radius of the building site. And then some of the design things that can be considered are down below there listed. Next slide. Going deeper into the design standards, there's a specific design standard under 2B that says garages, carports, outbuildings, etc. should not be street forward and of materials and styles that blend with existing structures and neighborhoods. So I added the emphasis there, the bold font, to bring this to your attention tonight. And so then we have letter K in this section under Article 13 of the city zoning ordinance, that the Planning Commission may approve materials, and then again, emphasis added, and designs, that's what we're looking at, and designs that differ from those required within the ordinance, provided the following criteria are met. So they have 3 different criteria. So that's what's before you tonight. The applicant has asked for basically that design forward of the garages on those lots 121 through 127 in that River Oaks Section C subdivision. Next slide. So this is a kind of a map of the subject area with the 7 lots highlighted there with the blue box. This is an older picture taken from the county's GIS database, so it's prior to construction of the infrastructure and the cities, and the homes that are there now. So next slide. So this is a field photo, shows Thomas Street, and that actually shows there on the kind of the left-hand or upper portion of the picture shows those lots, or a portion of those lots, 121 through 127. So you can see the infrastructure's in and so forth. Next slide. So we got a couple pictures here now showing other parts of the River Oaks Section C subdivision. As you can see there, this is around the corner from the previous slide. So this is looking south. You can see the houses that have been built there. Some have been occupied, and it's got a nice design there with the garages and the plane of the house basically being equal or thereabouts. Next slide. And so this is on the corner of Thomas Street. This shows actually there's kind of a side entry on the garage, but it's still in keeping with the plane of the side of the house. Next slide. So just another slide showing those 7 lots as a part of River Oaks Section C subdivision. Next slide. And then here you have, this is basically the footprint and then the plan of what's desired to be built by the builder for those lots. So you can see the footprint there highlighted with the yellow, and then the actual larger design or plan, if you will, there on the right hand of the slide. Let me point out a couple other things I have in my notes. Because I read earlier that it said it's what is pertinent to what to be looked at is other zoning districts, same type of zoning district within 500 feet. So the zoning of the subject properties is PUD, which is planned unit development. So other PUD zoning in the area is directly west of the lots. And there's 30 lots that are west of the area under consideration. And 19 of those 30 have widths of either 41 feet or less. And then of those 30, there's 8 that meet the design definition of garage forward. So if you do some math there, it just gives a metric here of 8 divided by 30. So 27% of the lots directly west of what's being considered are garage forward. And basically in the section C of the subdivision, there's 34 lots, and if all of these were permitted to be built garage forward, that would be 7 of 34, so it'd be only 21%. So actually, it would be getting closer to the city's standard. And another thing to mention, as the wording was there, is that it didn't say it shall be or it may be, it just says it should be. So that's a key thing, I think. So, because there's a section in the zoning ordinance, most zoning ordinances for that matter, it talks about rules of interpretation of different phrases or words that are used within the document, where it would say may would mean permissive, shall would mean required. But in this case, where the wording is on the architectural standards of that garage forward design, it says it should be, meaning that it shouldn't be garage forward, but that's the standard, that's the wording or whatever. So, and then next slide, please, which is the last one. So that's a possible motion. This is not a recommendation to the Board of Aldermen. So basically, it would be a decision whether you want to permit it or not, based upon what you hear from like staff and the applicant or whatever. So that would conclude the presentation, unless you have any questions. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions for staff?
Chairman,
Yes.
when this subdivision was approved, were these architectural design standards already in effect?
Good question. I believe they were. The subdivision's been approved for a little while, but the architectural standards, I think, are a little bit older. I don't know if I have a specific note on that in my notes here or not. Let me look here real quick. Yeah, I don't think I have that date. It looks like the houses to the west of the area that's being developed, most of those houses were built between like 96 and 06. So those are a little bit older. They've got some age to those homes to the west. Whether the architectural standard was in place over there or not, I can't answer that. I don't know that for certain.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? All right, the applicant come forward. Just state your name and address.
629 College Road, South Haven, Mississippi.
All right, was there would you like to make a short statement?
Main reason for making this request is those particular lots are skinnier than the rest of it, and fitting a garage rear style house is difficult.
All right, does anybody have any questions or comments?
Noticed across the street from these 7 lots, there's only 6 lots. Are you just simply trying to squeeze in another lot?
No, so across the street, you got a corner lot that is causing us to basically lose that lot. And what we did is that additional square footage, we spread across those other 6. Well, so we couldn't fit 7 lots on the south side that met the requirements of the city, but we could on the north side.
But only if we give you a variance or an exception.
Well, the houses, we weren't aware of the requirement at the time of the subdivision approval. We weren't aware that that was a requirement.
Why not?
It just didn't get brought up because we were copying the previous section, which allowed garage forwards.
So there is a plan that you can put in those 7 lots that would make that would meet the requirements, but it would be more difficult. Is that what?
No, maybe I used the wrong word. There's not enough width where you end up with a bedroom beside the garage, so it would be in my opinion, a very ugly house. Maybe you could explain it better too, where a very ugly house with a long hallway.
I'm Johnny Coleman, I'm the builder. I had bought the development and developed it myself.
What year was that, sir?
When I developed it was last year, but the subdivision was approved in 4 years ago, and it had the same lots. Now, I wasn't aware of the building standard either. Matter of fact, when I first got started, I was building some of the same plans that I usually do. Chad brought up the standard, and I talked to him then, and I said, we'll hit it down the road. What I did is I redesigned every plan in there just to make sure the body of the house was forward. Even the 6 you were talking about there, I'm going to be able to work out. The problem with these 7 is there's no way possible to build a house forward with having a garage.
Well, in going down the street of that subdivision, it really doesn't look to me like any of the houses are forward as far as in relationship to the garage. They're all like exactly even. So none of them are forward. I don't know if that fits the definition of house forward or not, but in my book, it's like even.
I think what I understand why the ordinance was there. If you look west of where my lots are, most of them don't even have a garage. And if they're not done right with all brick, a lot of siding, stuff like that, it just doesn't look good now or over time.
I know when this ordinance was changed, the objective was so it didn't look like we had a house full or a street full of garages for sale. They wanted like front porches and front doors. And even with the design you have, even the front door is recessed. You still can't see the front door from the street. And I mean, you just about have to walk right up to the house.
And you got 5 and 5 side yards. So
Yeah,
you're 10 apart. So
that's
it's
true.
a little bit different than a 3 and 3 kind of setup. Then you're really closed up. But to maintain a 5 and 5, you almost have to have like a 30-foot wide house. So by the time you put your garage, your brick, and everything else, it gives you about 7, 8 feet. You really can't push that and be usable footage for 20 feet of depth, if that makes sense.
Well, it does, because it's trying to fit a long foot into a narrow shoe,
Right.
you know? So, but I feel like the fact that you didn't know this is not really a concern that we should carry the load on.
You're right, but these were approved by the planning commission and the board of directors.
And that's why I was trying to figure out what year that would happen and what year this ordinance
I have
happened.
asked for the ordinance and what year that was in when we first started. Tell you the truth, we were behind, didn't really care. I just did what Chad wanted me to. I scrapped my first plans that I built before that are very nice, just got through in a subdivision in Hernando, building the same plans. When he brought that up, I said, they do look even, or they might be set back a little bit, but they don't give you the, the frontage. And I said, at this point in time, we'll just cross it when we get down the street. I've not been in a city where I had this ordinance before. And so it's kind of new, but I want to try to do, the best I can and make a good product. And we're starting at prices in the mid 250s and up. And
And
it's
how
a
many
nice
square
subdivision.
feet are the houses?
1450 and up. So I don't know what else can be done. It's almost unbuildable if you don't do that. And you wouldn't want, okay, I'll put it this way, you could build a 2-story up above a garage. I don't think anybody in this room wants that in the city of Horn Lake. That's something you'd see out of town in condos and.
Well, I'm kind of sitting here feeling like you kicked this decision down the road thinking we'll deal with it later. And
I did.
And now that's put us in a position of either swallowing the pill hard or making you get rid of a lot, and which is going to reset that whole section.
Mr. Barr, maybe I can ask you this, and I'm not even suggesting that they could do this, but what would happen if they went back in that one section that they're talking about and redo the lots? What process would that be, if it was even feasible for them to redraw those 7 lots into maybe 6 lots? That's just a question.
Good question. It is possible. I mean, it's not, I mean, it's each subdivision that gets platted and recorded or whatever. I mean, obviously they can be revised. Sometimes they get revised if there's an error or something that's found or whatever. So it basically would be a revision of those lots or that portion of the subdivision, and then they would have to be basically wider lots, which are probably getting fewer lots, and then that would go through. It'd come back to the planning commission for review, and then you'd make a recommendation on that to the board of aldermen. It would have to be up to them if they wanted to approve it or basically leave it as it is or go with something else for design. So when I look at the section I, where it talks about the residential design standards for single family homes, it has an ordinance date of like May of 2016. So, but what I don't know from that is that if that's when that came into effect, where that requirement came from, or if it was just some amendment that happened back in 2016, May of 16. So that's the only date I have to work with, but I'm not sure of the exact substance of what that ordinance was. So
Okay.
from that date.
And this subdivision is, a continuance of what was before that. And the lots were approved. So me as a builder, I come in and, get the lots and everything, and you kind of see what's around you. And I knew I didn't want to build what's to the west. I want to build something nicer, which I have. And Chaz looked at it, everybody's looked at it, that it's a nicer product. But we have 7 lots that conform with the west, and they were approved. So I don't really know what to do.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask Mr. Barr a question?
Yeah, go
So,
ahead.
When this was approved, is it the builder's responsibility to know this requirement with garage or with house forward, or is it the department's responsibility to tell him that he submitted something that's in error or that needs to be adjusted?
Well, good question. What we like to do under the current administration or whatever, since I've been director, is we like to have pre-development meetings. So we can go through some different scenarios with developers, builders, you know, whether it's a subdivision, whether it's a single commercial project or something like that, to work through some things. And hopefully we don't miss anything. Obviously, sometimes we do. So now what was going back, you know, prior as far as what's going through things and how that was being reviewed, I'm not sure. So we're kind of was here to guess or what have you. But it would be nice, like through a pre-development meeting, to go through something like this and bring this to a builder's attention. So if they're thinking about a particular design or, you know, theme, if you will, for a subdivision, they can if they need to make changes, it's easier to do them earlier on than as opposed to like where we're at this point, where it's been recorded and what 80% of the subdivision has been built upon. So that would be my answer or whatever. It would be nice to meet those things ahead of time. I do know that the city for a while was not checking these things on the building permits applications as they were coming in. I don't know why that was, if it was they just were missing it or they weren't thinking about it or whatever. And so that was brought to our attention last year. And I made a decision as the director, basically in June of last year, to notify a lot of the builders, some of the developers in the community that we were active with, to let them know that we wanted to go back with what I called a hard reset of the standard come January 1st of this year. And that's what we did. So we've been trying to make pretty much everybody abide by that. But having said that, I just still point out to the language in there. It says it shouldn't be garage forward. It doesn't say it shall, which is a different word from an administrative enforcement standpoint. It's just that's the desire of the city. It's not actually a requirement. So, but we're mostly trying to get people to abide by that because it's been articulated to staff that the city would really like to go with that non-garage forward design. And so far, that's what they've been fine with the things that they're building, the different plans in that subdivision. So,
Thank you.
Yeah, we have made a, you know, attempt, and I think Chad will tell you, to go by that, and we got stuck. I did not kick it down the road so we would do whatever. I just didn't know what to do. So I redid our plans and made sure me and Chad sat down with them, looked at them, everything's good. So I have made an effort in everything I've done so far. I don't know what to do at this point.
Chair,
Yes,
are you,
yes,
are you willing to do a revision of 6 lots?
I would not like to.
Well, it'd be more than just changing lot lines. We got sewer and water in, so all those sewer taps and locations have to change. That's in the middle of the street, so it's not just an easy thing that we're gonna move this sewer tap over 25 feet.
All right, any other questions for the applicant? Do we have any discussion here on the commissioners? Do we have a motion?
Chairman?
Go ahead.
Based on the fact that the ordinance says should instead of shall, after review of case number 2023-22, a request by Nick Croonan, an engineer representing Johnny Coleman, owner of the River Oaks Section C subdivision, for a design exception for lots 121 through 127 of said subdivision. The Horn Lake Planning Commission approves the said request.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Vidal,
Yes.
Commissioner Stokes,
Yes.
Commissioner Egner,
Yes.
Commissioner Mercer,
Yes.
Commissioner Kirkley, Commissioner McGann, yes. Motion passes.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, on to new business. Case number 2023-14 CU, a request for conditional use at 4323 Goodman Road West by Dale and Judy Wilson, landowner, Mark Campbell, representative landowner, with Carter Engineering, Bogart, Georgia, for a proposed restaurant with drive-through land use on land consisting of 2.71 acres plus minus. The subject parcel is Zone PUD, or Planned Unit Development, by the City of Horn Lake. And I will turn this over to staff.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll turn this over to our Assistant Director, Mr. Hawkinsmith.
Next slide, please. So right here is the current parcel lines and surroundings of the land we're going to talk about. This is right off of Goodman Road, south of Goodman Road, right next to Fountain Lane. There's technically 2 lots right there. Next slide, please. And this is Zone PUD. On the screen there, the north of Goodman is C4, and south of Goodman, it's a slightly different shade there. That is all PUD on the south side. Next slide, please. Yeah, and as I said, this both parcels are zoned PUD. This falls within the Fairfield Meadow PUD, which is, that was created when the properties were outside of Horn Lake's boundaries, and thus under DeSoto County jurisdiction at that time, which led to the language of the plat referring to DeSoto County zoning regulations. So when you pull it up in GIS, it still talks about the DeSoto County zoning regulations. And the plat does not give specific details on the uses allowed to fill in those properties. Other than that, the commercial properties will follow DeSoto County C1 zoning, which we as the planning staff decided to just make it the same and treat it the same as Horn Lake's C1 zoning. Next slide, please. And so here's the site plan that they provided, thrown on top of the current aerial imagery. Next slide, please. So the case we're looking at right now, this is just for the conditional use of the restaurant with the drive-through here. And so in the ordinance in Article 10, applications, see conditional uses. Number 1 says, subject to the provisions of this section, the governing authority may, by resolution, grant a conditional use permit for the uses enumerated as conditional uses in any zone district as herein qualified, and shall impose appropriate conditions and safeguards, including a specified period of time for the use to protect the comprehensive plan and conserve and protect property and property values in the neighborhood. Next slide. And number 2 is an application or a conditional use permit for uses authorized by this ordinance shall be made to the Planning Commission. Public hearing shall be held after giving at least 15 days notice of the hearing in an official paper specifying the time and place for said hearing. The Planning Commission shall investigate all aspects of the application, giving particular regard to whether the proposed conditional use will A, substantially increase traffic hazards or congestion. B, substantially increase fire hazards. C, adversely affect the character of the neighborhood. D, adversely affect the general welfare of the city. E, overtax public utilities or community facilities. F, be in conflict with the comprehensive plan. And so, also, in addition to that, this is just for background info. Upon receipt of written findings concerning the proposed conditional use from the Planning Commission, the governing authority shall make a determination as to whether or not a conditional use permit shall be issued. However, the governing authority shall not grant a conditional use permit unless satisfactory provisions have been made concerning the following. And these ones are a little bit different, but I'll read them off. A, off-street parking and loading areas. B, refuse and service areas. C, utilities with reference to locations, availability, and compatibility. D, screening and buffering with reference to type, dimensions, and character. E, required yards and other open space. F, general compatibility with adjacent properties and other property in the zone district. And G, any other provisions deemed applicable by the governing authority. And then I'll just finish up what else is required also. Number 4, every applicant for a conditional use permit shall submit a site plan in accordance with Article 5, Section P. And 5, any proposed conditional use shall otherwise comply with all other regulations set forth in this ordinance for the zone district in which such use is located. And number 6, a time limit. So, we're going to focus on just what the Planning Commission is going to review tonight. The applicant was aware of these. They had an opportunity to submit a response, and they addressed all of these. And so I'm going to read what the applicant says and what the planning staff has said for each of these letters. So the first one, letter A, will this conditional use substantially increase traffic hazards or congestion? So the applicant has stated that the proposed Chick-fil-A is designed to minimize traffic hazards or congestion to the greatest extent possible. The staff said, based on their operations of other Chick-fil-A locations in the region, there is concern about placing this Chick-fil-A next to a road with fast traffic and congestion, as Chick-fil-A is notorious for attracting long lines of drive-through users. However, based on the site plan already given to us, this appears to be mitigated by wrapping the queuing vehicles in a design least likely to have them backed up to Goodman Road. So we, specifically based on the design given to us, we are in agreement that Chick-fil-A has tried their best to reduce any kind of congestion backing up on the Goodman Road. However, that's not to say that it won't go all the way up there, but there was an attempt made to make it the least harmful as possible. Next slide, please. So, letter B, will this conditional use substantially increase fire hazards? Applicant response was, the proposed Chick-fil-A will include the construction of a new fire hydrant and a sprinkler system for the building to reduce fire hazards. Staff analysis was, this use will likely not substantially increase fire hazards. The fire hazard associated with this use is likely approximately the same as any other standalone fast food restaurant with a drive-through. So we feel that there's no extra fire hazard associated in addition to any other fast food restaurant that would come in. Next slide, please. Letter C, will this conditional use adversely affect the character of the neighborhood? Applicant response was, the proposed Chick-fil-A is along Goodman Road, as are other similar restaurants with drive-through service along this corridor. Staff analysis is that this use will be of the same character of many of the commercial uses nearby. On the lots directly to the east, there are multiple fast food restaurants with drive-throughs, as well as one currently directly to the north. So basically, this is going to fit in with the character of everything else nearby. The whole area nearby is fast food. Next slide, please. Letter D, will this conditional use adversely affect the general welfare of the city? Applicant response is, Chick-fil-A prides itself in the service to the community and positively impacting the character and welfare of the area, and looks forward to greater service opportunities in the city of Horn Lake. And the staff analysis is that there's no reason to believe this will adversely affect the general welfare of the city. And letter E, will this conditional use overtax public utilities or community facilities? Applicant response was, the public utilities such as water and sewer are existing along Goodman Road, and no negative impact is expected on community facilities. And the staff analysis was that There is currently no evidence to suggest that this will overtax public utilities or community facilities. Letter F, and this is the last one. Will this conditional use be in conflict with the comprehensive plan? Applicant response was comprehensive plan promotes economic development and a healthy mix of land use types that are responsive to the market. The proposed Chick-fil-A seeks to align with the goals by providing opportunities for connectivity. So the staff analysis was that the current comprehensive plan's proposed land use map shows medium density residential zoning in this location, but commercial zoning directly adjacent to it. This development generally falls close to the desired outcome of land uses as proposed in the comprehensive plan. While it doesn't exactly match it, this land use will not be in conflict with what the comprehensive plan was intending. And so we don't see this as conflicting with it. And so that concludes everything that has to be met or investigated on that. And so here's a possible motion. That is it for the presentation.
Thank you. All right, do we have any questions for staff?
I got a question I'd like to, drawings that you have, do you have any idea from the elevation from the back of the houses to the street of Goodman Road? Do you know how much of a drop it is from there?
Can you scroll back up to that, the site plan put on top of the aerial view? So the site plan is actually going to be a different case, but we can still talk about some of the aspects of the site plan if you would like, but this is just for the conditional use, literally just seeing if the conditional use of the drive-through with the restaurant is going to have any negative impacts on the city.
Well, that wasn't necessarily what I was concerned about. I was concerned about the water flow. It has a catch basin there already. There's 12 to 14 houses right behind this piece of property. The catch basin is about 4 foot, maybe 5 foot deep. And in the front of it, right close to Goodman Road, there is a city sewer or city water line that it's up about 2 foot higher than the bottom of the catch basin. What I'm trying to figure out is the slope from the back of the property line to the street. How much of a fall is it?
Good evening.
Reason I'm asking you that is how much do you have to dig down from the back side? How much soil do you have to remove? How deep? So that the water will still stay in the catch basin or go into the city things. Because you're going to have to, there's a hill there. You can't build a store without moving some of the soil.
If you can just state your name and address, and then you can address.
My name is Mark Campbell. I'm with Carter Engineering. My address is 1010 Commerce Drive, Bogart, Georgia. And I'm a civil engineer on this project representing Chick-fil-A. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. I know we have a couple cases here tonight, so I'll apologize if I get anything conflated, but we're excited about this project. We're excited about the opportunity. I know a lot of people have been working on this project a lot longer than I have. But I appreciate the help of your planning staff. I think I originally reached out to Chad in May of this year. We've been having some of those pre-development meetings. Chick-fil-A is looking forward to servicing this community and looking forward to it so much that I will say I'll ask for an amendment on that last slide because it's no longer 2.71 acres, as you can see on your agenda it's now 3.79 acres. So what started as just the western portion of the lot is now the image you see in front of you where it would be the totality. And is it Mr. Mercer? Is that right?
Yes.
Mr. Mercer, you are correct in that the residential property to the south sits higher than Goodman Road. And it generally flows in that direction. So it generally flows to the north. If you'll look at the image there, and on the western side of the property, there's already a stormwater management area. And there's a little bit of a swale that's there, is what I would call it. We like to say swale more than we like to say ditch, okay? But there's a swale that leads the water now from those residential properties generally to the west towards that stormwater management
You know,
area.
it basically comes all the way back. I know at least 6 houses. It's, has a swell that goes in and ties into the, catch basin.
That's correct.
But now, how much, from that back swell behind the houses, say over in the middle part of the property, how much are you gonna have to remove, soil are you gonna have to remove down? The reason I'm asking that is the rainwater that you get now, falling on that empty property, runs to basically to the street. And when you start digging down how the backside to make it level enough to build a house on or build a business on, how deep how much soil are you gonna have to remove?
The short answer is I don't know exactly. I have looked at some preliminary grading plans. I don't think that we're going to move a lot of soil on this site in any great distance, either bringing things up or lowering things down. And I think that the swale that's in the rear now is doing a great job of moving some of what I would consider off-site water from that area where it doesn't flow directly to Goodman Road, but more either in a westerly direction towards that existing basin or a little bit, the portion that's to the east kind of flows a little bit towards that corner there at that signalized intersection. You can see an existing stormwater basin there as well. But again, hopefully that helps. I don't have the exact detail of that. We can get into any other questions on the conditional use permit if need be, but I don't think we're going to be moving a tremendous amount of earth, you know, to raise or lower the finished floor elevation of the proposed Chick-fil-A there vertically.
Well, the reason I was asking was concerned that when you take the soil down, aren't you moving it to the front to, when it gets level? Where is the rainwater going to go when it's level? Because it can't go over to the catch basin unless you cut it into the catch basin, cut the soil down in the catch basin. There is a city, I guess a drain sewer, what I'm gonna call it, in ahead of that catch basin. There's no other way that water can do other than if it's flat, go out into the streets.
So the design of the Chick-fil-A and the grading of the Chick-fil-A will include the installation of stormwater catch basins interior to the Chick-fil-A lot, whether that's in the drive-through area or whether that's in the parking lot area. Even the roof leaders of the building, those types of things will tie into that system. And that system will either drain into the existing pond that's there, that's on the western portion of the property, or it will drain to a new system that as of yet does not exist.
And you'll have that, and you'll have all that worked out on the site plan when that's designed.
I've got some placeholders that are in there now based on the things, but we actually are in the process of developing those.
Okay.
I was trying not to get too far ahead of myself with the detailed design before we actually had a conditional use permit to allow a restaurant with a drive.
Very understandable. So do we have any other questions concerning the conditional use?
Can you explain to us the traffic flow? I think it just sounds like people might be concerned about traffic. Of course, Chick-fil-A bring traffic. We all know that, which is good. But how do you think the flow, because on Goodman Road, especially when you are open, it probably, you know, if Bojangles backed up all the way down Goodman Road, we know Chick-fil-A will. So how do you expect this flow and the traffic flow to go as far as helping us on Goodman?
That's a great question. So what we try to do is completely different than what we may have done just 5 or 6 years ago. So if you think about the way restaurants with drive-throughs used to be designed, and I'm guilty of designing them this way myself before I knew better maybe, is you put the building in the center of the site, you wrap the drive-through around the site, and then you put all the parking on the perimeter. And that works great until it doesn't. And so you've probably seen some examples of that. So Chick-fil-A has been very innovative in their drive-through. They pride themselves on service, and what they have figured out, even just in the last few years, is the best thing to do is to bifurcate that traffic. So it's very rare that somebody says, hey, I'm going to go through the drive-through and I'm going to go inside and sit down and eat. It's an or. You're either going to go through the drive-through or you're going to do that. So what we then do is create a double-wide drive-through lane that's separated from the parking field. And drive-throughs move in one direction, so we like for our traffic to move in one direction. And what we do is we put that meal delivery point as far away from wherever somebody comes into the site as they can possibly be. And on this site, and I'll use approximate numbers, right? So it's approximately 500 feet from the place where you pick up that meal to the place where you enter into the site, no matter which direction you come from. And that's 2 lanes wide. So we can talk about 50 or so cars that are being able to stack within the drive-through as it's currently designed. Now, most places would love to have a fraction of that. So I can't guarantee you that there one day won't be 60 cars, but we're doing everything we can with this design to make sure that you can stack as many cars as possible, and maybe more cars than any other drive-through, certainly in this city, maybe in this whole county, that doesn't negatively impact any neighbors. And like I said, they've gone so far as not to want to impact any neighbors that they've decided to look at buying the other acre that's next to it there, which makes it go from the 2.71 to the 3.79.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's why you bought the other lot, to be able to accommodate Goodman Road and trying to. Yeah, we're gonna say try, because we know grand opening is different. It's a different beast, but we'll give it a month before we come.
All right, any other questions?
I have a question. So your drive-through is going to be 2 lane. You know, I've been to Chick-fil-A in Olive Branch, and I was pretty sure that was wider than 2 lanes. They're right there on Camp Creek, and I mean, they are like right on the curb. And I was just astounded at how many cars got through there without being on Camp Creek. And the process that Chick-fil-A has in servicing their customers and getting them around there. And once you get your order put in, even if they can't give it to you right then, you move down to the receiving area and get out of the way. And I'm just going to have to say, they handled a tremendous amount of cars. They were extremely close to the curb, and I didn't see anybody backed up over there.
All right, thank you. All right, we're going to open up the public hearing portion. Does anybody want to speak? All right, go ahead. You can come on up. I just want to remind, as he's coming up, anybody that wants to speak publicly, we are giving a 3-minute time for anybody that wants to speak.
You give me a 30-second warning when I'm out of time. Thank you. My name is Francis J. Miller, 14 voting resident of Ward 5 of the city of Horn Lake. This Chick-fil-A must be built in Horn Lake. It's the greatest fast food in the world. They have their employees off on Sunday so everybody can worship God. That's my number 1 reason. Number 2, they hire the best people in the world that do not talk back to you and do not steal. Number 3, the service of their food is the best you'll ever eat. Number 4, South Haven is so proud they got a Chick-fil-A on Getwell, and they will only let certain businesses open up on Getwell. Number 4, I pray to God that the Planning Commission, aldermen, and everybody in Horn Lake makes it possible for Chick-fil-A to get here. Did I fulfill my time?
Yes, sir, you did. All right, would anybody else like to speak? All right, we're closing this portion of the public hearing. All right, do we have any other discussions from the commissioners? All right, do we have a motion?
I have a motion.
All right, go ahead.
After review of case number 2023-14, conditional use, the planning commission recommends approval of the request for a conditional use at 4323 Goodman Road West by Dale and Judy Wilson, landowners, and Mark Campbell, representative of landowner with Carter Engineering, for a proposed restaurant with a drive-through land use on land consisting of 3.79 acres.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Stokes and a second by Commissioner Egner. Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Mercer,
Yes.
Commissioner Kirkley. Yes. Commissioner Stokes,
Yes.
Commissioner Vidal,
Yes.
Commissioner Egner,
Yes.
Commissioner McGann, yes. Motion passes.
Thank y'all. All right, moving on to next case, case number 2023-17, SPDR, a request for site plan and design review for a convenience store with additional commercial bays at approximately 6215 US Highway 51 North by Singh Development Incorporated, developer, and the Bray firm engineer or designer. Subject parcel consists of 4.13 acres plus or minus and is lot 5 of a subdivision known as SP2 Horn Lake. The subject parcel is currently zoned C4 Planned Commercial District. The address above is unofficial and unassigned. And now I'll turn this over to our staff.
All right, and I'll be doing this case as well. Here's the current parcel lines and surroundings. This lot is directly west of Highway 51, next to the GXO warehouse, and just to the west of Hopper Drive. Next slide, please. And so, as it was just stated, the current zoning is C4. And then the surrounding zonings, you have a little bit of C4 and M1, so it's a very commercial and industrial area with a little bit of AR to the east. Next slide, please. And so I threw in the overall site plan here first, just to get an idea of the basic layout coming in from Highway 51. Next slide, please. And so we're going to start with analyzing the facade. So here's the elevation facing east, and it's consisting primarily of brick and glass. Next slide, please. And these are the other elevations: the south elevation, the north elevation, and then the west. And they're all of the same architectural design, all other elevations consisting mainly of brick. Next slide, please. And so the architectural standards in the code specifies the building design, and so it says the building design shall exhibit architectural control which seeks to be creative and which best utilizes building lines, shapes, and angles to maximize architectural integrity. It meets that requirement: unadorned, pre-stressed, upright concrete panels, unfinished concrete block, galvanized or unfinished steel, galvalume or unfinished aluminum buildings, and pole-type building materials are not permitted as primary exterior building materials. It meets this requirement. At least 50% of all exterior wall finishes shall be comprised of any combination of at least two of the following materials: brick, natural stone, glass, stucco, or stucco-like finishes. And this exterior is at least 50% brick and glass, which meets that requirement. In addition to that, accent materials shall be used for cornices, sills, bases, lintels, banding, and decorative accent trims. All accent materials shall consist of materials that meet or exceed the quality of the primary exterior materials and shall be consistent with building design. All materials are consistent, so it meets that requirement. And then a minimum of 20% of the facade facing the public right-of-way shall be glass, and the glass percentage far exceeds this requirement, so it passes that too. And then E is not applicable. And then F, it says any new building shall be constructed so that all exterior sides shall be surfaced equivalent to the front of the building, and it passes this requirement as well. Next slide, please. So this one's about the roof pitch requirement. Technically this says all one-story buildings less than 10,000 gross square feet must have a pitched roof between 5 to 12 and 12 to 12 as much as possible. If a pitched roof is not possible, a combination of flat roof and pitched roof is required. So this is 6,365 square feet. So technically, according to the code, a pitched roof will be required. However, I know this comes up all the time. The Planning Commission is permitted to waive this requirement if the architectural design meets the intended goals of the design ordinances. Next slide, please. This is about off-street parking and loading. And so, according to this, it requires one space per 200 square feet of gross leasable area. So since this is 6,365 square feet, that divided by 200 is 31.285 spaces required, and they provided 32 spaces, so it passes that requirement. Next slide, please. And this one is off-street parking and loading regarding handicap parking spaces. So for the first 100 spaces, it requires one handicapped space for every 25 spaces or fraction thereof. The site plan shows 2 handicapped spaces for the 30 regular spaces, and so this meets that requirement. And then for the next one, this is about the dimensions of it. So minimum dimensions for handicap parking space shall be 12.5 feet by 20 feet. So it needs to be 12.5 by 20, but the drawing shows 9 by 20. So therefore that would have to be corrected. And then as far as the regular parking spaces, that is required to be 10 by 18, but the drawing shows 9 by 20. So they would have to be widened from 9 to 10 feet. Next slide, please. So this is about the design provisions applying to all vehicular areas. No more than 10 contiguous spaces shall be provided without the benefit of a landscaped island. They do meet that requirement. Parking aisles shall be terminated at both ends of contiguous aisles with landscaped islands. That requirement is met. Landscaped island shall have inside dimensions of not less than 5 feet wide and 17 feet long, or 35 feet long if there is a double row of parking. Each side of the landscaped island shall have a continuous 6-inch high curb of concrete. That's met. The planting islands shall contain at least 1 tree, low shrubs, and ground cover. This has been met. If a vehicular area abuts a landscape buffer yard, continuous curbing shall be provided between vehicular area and the required buffer yard. That requirement is met. So all those are good. Next slide, please. This is about the dumpster enclosure. The dumpster enclosure will be screened from view with an enclosure landscaping in the northwest corner of the parking lot. And so this meets the enclosure requirement. Basically, you shouldn't be able to see the actual dumpster from the roadway. And so they made sure to block that from view. Next slide, please. And here's the drainage plan. So if you look at the site plan there, right now, there is a drain built into the grassy area right there. Right now, this is all grass, but there's an existing drain just out there in the field where it dips down. And then the plan is to build around it and drain all the water into that spot. And so I'll just read what I have here. Inside the red circle is a stormwater drain at the lowest land elevation. It is a currently existing drain in the grass, and the water from all paved surfaces will drain into it. So this is technically permitted according to the code. However, more detail is preferred to ensure that this inlet will not be overwhelmed, because if you look at the slopes of everything, it's going to be a lot of water rushing into that area. So basically, the concern is the water overflowing that ditch and getting into the roadway. And so what we're wanting to know is how much water flow is going to be rushed down there, and will that go over the ditch and into the road? And so we're asking the applicant to address all of this. And that is all I have for this presentation.
All right, thank you. All right, so do any of the commissioners have any questions for staff? Is the applicant here? If you'll come up and give your name and address for me.
Hi, good evening. Donnie Singh Development, 5100 Poplar Avenue, Memphis, Tennessee.
All right, does anybody have any questions for the applicant?
How you plan to address the drainage issue?
Our civil engineer, we won't have an issue addressing that. We can either add some drainage pond or something like that off to the west side there, or behind the building to mitigate the water flowing all at once. We can redo that drain, no problem putting in a bigger inlet or a bigger culvert, whatever is necessary to accommodate that. David Bray, our civil engineer, he's out today, but we can address that no matter what, because we have plenty of land at that site to where we can add a pond as well if needed, because I think the whole site's about 4 1/4 acres or something like that, and the store's only taking up about 1 1/4 acres or something. So land-wise, we shouldn't have any issues adding anything there. So.
All right, any other questions for the applicant? All right, do we have a motion?
At the review of case number 2023-17, SPDR, the Planning Commission recommends approval of the request for a site plan and design review for a convenience store with additional commercial bays at approximately 6215 US Highway 51 North by Side Development Incorporated developer and Bray Firm, engineer or designer on land consisting of plus or minus 4.13 acres, listed as Lot 5 of subdivision known as SP2 Horn Lake. If recommended approval, the following conditions: build a handicap space at the required dimension of 12.5 feet by 20 feet, build a regular space at the required dimension of 10 feet by 18 feet, and also the suggestions you made in addressing the stormwater.
Also, I already got with David on the for the parking adjustments. He was just using a different city's code on that, but that shouldn't be an issue to fix those as well.
All right, do we have a second?
I second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any other discussion?
Question? Are we going to waive the pitched roof requirement?
Do we, so the question is are we going to address the pitch roof requirement? Are we going to add, is there an amendment to add to the motion to waive that or to require that?
I don't have any problem with adding that as a waiver to.
I'll amend my motion to waive the pitch roof requirement.
All right, and is your second still good? Yes. All right, the second is still good. Any other discussion? Yes.
If I may, we've got a typo in the possible motion. In this capacity, actually wouldn't be recommending to the Board of Aldermen. You'd just be either approving or denying or approving with conditions. So I just wanted to point that out. Apologize for the error.
Okay. All right, roll call, please.
Commissioner Egner,
Yes.
Commissioner Stokes,
Yes.
Commissioner Mercer,
Yes.
Commissioner McGann, yes. Commissioner Kirkley,
Yes.
Commissioner Vidal.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Passes.
Thank y'all.
All right, on to our next case, case number 2023-23 AI. It's an Alderman initiative for a potential text amendment to the City of Horn Lake zoning ordinance and city code initiated during the Alderman meeting of July 18th, 2023, regarding residential accessory uses such as wading pools and trampolines, and clarifying the city ordinance regarding the printing of on sale and merchandise bags for fireworks. Potential text amendments would be to the Article 5, General Provisions and Supplemental Zone District Regulations, Item D of the City Zone Ordinance, and Chapter 3 Fireworks Section 16-67G of the City Code. And I will turn this over to our staff.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, that's explanation there. That's a good starting point there. So next slide. So what we've got here is two slides that basically details why a text amendment comes before the Planning Commission. So there's at least 2 points in the city code where that's required. And so these are just excerpts from the city code detailing that. Here's Article 2, which talks about the Planning Commission, specifically Section 24-19. And then you go down the slide there a little bit under, not yet. Yeah, there we go. Under number 5, B and C, it says 5 is review. This is items for to do by the Planning Commission. Is to review, consider, study, and make recommendations to the mayor and board of aldermen on the following items. And then item B and C, they're in bold print there, which is added emphasis. Proposed zoning ordinances, and then C, proposed amendments to the above. So this would be an amendment, possible amendment to the city zoning ordinance. And then we can go on to the next slide there a little bit. Yes. Okay, so this here is from Article 11, Item O, which is the Planning Commission creation and duties. And then specifically under, it's number 2A, number 3, it says the Planning Commission shall have the following powers and duties. The Planning Commission shall hold public hearings on all matters relating to this ordinance, which requires such hearings, except appeals to the governing authority, including the number 3 is proposed amendments to the text of this ordinance. So those are the two main reasons why a text amendment would come before the Planning Commission for consideration and recommendation. Next slide. So what we have here is basically some definitions as found in the city zoning ordinance under item B, which is under Article 2. And here we have accessory building, which is a subordinate building, which is incidental to and customary in conjunction with a principal building or use and located on the same lot. And then number 2 there under item B, accessory use, a subordinate use which is incidental to and customary in connection with the principal building or use and located on the same lot, including but not limited to landscaping features, walls, fences, light fixtures, steps, paving, sidewalk, shutters, awnings, solar panels, satellite dishes, and signs. Next slide. So as I've stated before, you know, a lot of the zoning world just revolves around definitions. They're just really critical. And so what they say or what they don't say or how they're written, how well they're written is really a key thing. So what we have here, it was on the alderman's mind back in July, is they wanted more clarity, basically, on the subject of wading pools and trampolines, because as a general land use, they were seen around town in the front yards or side yards or stuff like that. And so what's prohibited is accessory uses and buildings from being established in front yards and side yards. And so we were just enforcing that by just basically connecting the dots, saying that, they're basically an accessory use. A wading pool on a residential property is not the principal land use, it would be a house. So, but in this case, what's proposed in that bold and purple font there, that's all the new language there, hopefully would clarify the issue. So you see under Article 5, which is the general provisions and supplemental zoning district regulations, item D of the city zoning ordinance, which deals with accessory buildings or structures, uses, swimming pools. But in that item D, that's the last time you see swimming pools mentioned. It's, even though there's still quite a bit of wording that follows under item D, swimming pools aren't mentioned in any other way other than in the title itself. So if you go to 1A here, which is on the screen, accessory buildings or uses are prohibited in the front yard and side yards of any zone district except as provided herein. And so what's proposed to be added is swimming pools, including wading pools, and trampolines shall all constitute accessory uses. So we're just trying to make that as just clear as possible from an enforcement standpoint. Because if something like this was adopted, hopefully that would make it easier for code enforcement to do their job out in the field. So next slide. So now going on to the subject of fireworks, that brings a person in the city code to Article 3. It's not in the zoning ordinance. There are some parts in the zoning ordinance, but in this case, it's under Article 3, Section 1667, sale and or use/discharge of fireworks, the existing wording. So that's under item G. And then what was approved as far as initiated was to add the word professionally printed bag containing such section provisions. So that basically would be to put the city ordinance dealing with the discharge and sales of fireworks on the bag itself. And this was an attempt to clarify that. Staff, in our opinion here, this does not help anything, because professionally is something that could still just be debated, what that constitute, what it doesn't constitute. I'm hoping, regardless of what the Planning Commission does tonight, that if the city wants to set a particular standard, they just stay the standard. I mean, it would be like very similar to like there's a certain distance of setback in a certain zoning district. It's 10 foot or it's 40 foot or it's whatever the number is. It's clear. It's this many feet, and it's, a front yard setback, it's a side yard setback, it's a rear yard setback. It's very clear. You just read it in the table and you can answer a citizen's question. So in this case, with the word professionally, it's an attempt to make things better, but I'm not sure if it quite gets there. I think it just still, then we're just debating, what does that mean? What does that constitute? For years I played trumpet. I retired from trumpet last year after 40 years, and sometimes people would hire me to play. So would that constitute, was I professional? I thought of that myself. Am I professional? Because somebody paid me to do this or whatever. So, but I don't know if that would constitute professional or not. So in this case, when you're talking about the professional level of printing on a bag, I'm not sure how you really clarify that. To me, I would actually hope through this process, the city would, if it wants a particular standard, would just set it. Let's say it has to be in a black bag with bright yellow ink fused to the bag in a Calibri style font, 12-point, and it's English on one side and Spanish on the other. I mean, that would be, and then if someone brings in a bag that's, green ink on a white bag, it's not the standard. So if they want to object it, they can, if they want to take the city to the court and see if that gets upheld or thrown out, they can do that. But then we have something as staff and also as code enforcement in the field, that's something they can clearly identify. But the professionally printed bag, it's like then we're just debating about words again, and we're hoping to kind of get away from that. So next slide. So there's a possible motion there as far as what your recommendation might be. That would conclude the presentation unless you have any questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, do we have any questions for staff?
Yes. Chad, could we separate these two items in the motion?
Yes, very good question. You could certainly do that if the Planning Commission felt inclined to recommend one way on one thing and recommend one on another, even though it's under one case. I think, because the subjects are different enough from each other that you can definitely do that. Yes.
Could it be possible that they could just have the printed material and hand it out at every sale? This bag thing is not necessary. you know, have the material and print it and specify what they wanted. And every time somebody, you know, pays for, you hand them out, make sure they get one.
Yeah, I think some places that sold fireworks did do that, and Board of Aldermen found that not satisfactory and went this route.
So what is their, like, you know, what is their concept of professionally printed?
That's an opinion.
Gotta put your name,
That's an opinion.
name of the company on it?
That's-
Or is
that'd
it a plain bag? It doesn't matter. The
Well,
bag, does the bag matter, or the material in the bag?
They held up a bag that they considered to be professionally printed, and I think they should have put that into words and put it into this example so that we would have something better to vote on.
Yeah, but what would what are we focusing on? The printed material or the bag itself? I would think it's getting whatever you need, whatever information you need out there. That is the purpose, not the bag.
Well, I agree with Commissioner Stokes that these ought to be separated, and this one ought to go back to the Board of Aldermen for some rewrites.
And it would save these people that's selling fireworks a lot of money if you just let them do it on the ticket. But anyway, that's another subject, I believe, so.
Okay.
We talking about what professional
So,
bags.
okay, do we have any other questions or concerns? Okay, so do we have a motion? Oh, yeah, it is a public hearing. So we'll open up public hearing.
And I will take less than 3 minutes.
Okay.
You don't have to give me a 30-second warning. My name is Francis J. Miller, 14 voting resident, Ward 5, City of Horn Lake. These two items must be split. There must be two separate votes. Number one, the fireworks situation has been a nightmare for 4 years. You handle that, I stay out of it. Now, we have so many problems in this city, we don't have to be messing with these landowners, kids and that, with their trampolines and little swimming pools in the front yard. Leave it alone, leave the landowners alone, and don't get involved in that, and don't bog planning down and the ordinance people are writing these ordinances on something we don't need to even worry about.
Is there anybody else that would like to speak? All right, this public hearing is closed. All right, do we have any other discussion?
Chairman,
Yes.
do we need two motions here, one to split these and then?
I do not believe so. I believe you can make a motion to do one and then make a motion to do the separate one. We don't have to make a motion to split the cases, just make two separate motions for what you're needing.
In that case, I move that we approve the language for the accessory buildings or structures used as swimming pools.
All right, there's a motion. Our first motion is to approve the recommended text about the trampolines and wading pools for accessory uses. Do we have a second?
I second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All right, any other discussion? All right, roll call.
Hold on, we do have a discussion. So does this mean little kids get in trouble for having a little bitty swimming pools in front, even if they get rid of it after?
That's ridiculous.
This is crazy.
Well, the difficulty was that the wading pools were being left in the front yard and the side yards with water in them unattended. And little kids from down the street were coming down and getting into them without anybody watching them get in that water.
It's definitely a safety issue,
Right.
I believe.
That's the issue that's really before us today. In the same way with the trampolines, kids were coming and jumping on a trampoline when nobody was at home.
It shouldn't be stationed.
So they should, I think they should be behind a fence
In the
in the
backyard.
backyard. They shouldn't be in the front yard or the side yard.
So if you still have a barbecue in your front yard, you still,
Yeah.
your child, you can't bring in a swimming pool out there or nothing. I agree, it shouldn't be stationed out there all night long, overnight. It should be in the backyard, but I'm talking about just temporary.
Okay, could there be something in there that says it cannot be left beyond a certain period of time, or if you use it, you have to remove it the same day, something to that effect.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it has to be in the backyard. It cannot be left, just like we say with banners, cannot be left beyond 24 hours or something like that.
So I think there are gonna be some good people that could be abused with this one.
Think if you were barbecuing in your side yard and you had your swimming pool out there for the afternoon, and then you put it in your backyard, that would probably go unnoticed, and nobody's gonna call code enforcement out there in 2 hours to give you a citation. But if you leave it out there all weekend,
That's a problem.
that's a problem.
But you want the language to be specific, so, you know.
So what's your suggestion on the
I'm
language?
just saying be on a 24-hour period, you know, and give a little bit of leeway for that day if you're having something.
I'll just caution, the only thing about the 24-hour period, though, we may all agree on that, but how do you judge the 24-hour period? Because if I see it, it could have been 24 hours, but it's during the middle of the day, I wouldn't
Yeah.
know, so.
And a child can drown in about 4 or 5 seconds, you know what I mean?
We can never win in any situation. We-
Barbecue and the neighbors come down. I think it's a safety issue, and I think that's why that they had.
Or can you say somebody has to be out there supervising or something, put some sort of language in there to give people a little bit of leeway, it's their home.
Well,
Who's going to police all that?
I don't know, that's a parent's
You know, that's the problem. There's,
generally,
Well, okay,
generally speaking, when you have a swimming pool, you're required to have a fence around it.
fence
Right.
around it.
Okay, so just having the pool out there right there, you're violating that, yet you don't have a fence
Hear
around
that,
it.
Jimmy? So you can't win for losing, I mean. So,
That swimming pool y'all talking about? Who puts a swimming pool in their front yard unless it's one of these?
Well,
a little waiting.
We're talking about those little bitty ones like the little kids will be in, you know,
A lot of people put those little kiddie pools in their front yard and side yards.
this don't include slip and slides, do it?
they be in
Yeah,
my,
I think it's,
I got up and there's one in my front yard, and it ain't even mine. That much. So,
But you do need something to regulate, because it's not nice having trampolines and stuff left out in the front yard. I totally agree with that. I just don't want this to be abused at some point.
how many houses in this area has got room enough to put a trampoline in the front yard?
You'd be surprised.
Surprised.
whether or not they do, they'll put it.
Certain areas, I'm sure, that you go to where you get into the $1 million home, something like that.
You know, I've been knocking on doors since February, and there's a lot of yards that can't fit anything but the trampoline, but it's out there.
Maybe if Chick-fil-A put a trampoline in front of their building, we won't have this issue.
So, so the current motion is to approve the recommended language about not having wade pools or trampolines in the front yard and considering them accessory uses. We're having some discussion. So currently, we do have a motion and a second. Do we have any amendments to that, or do we need to go ahead and do roll call?
excuse me, I would kick that back to the aldermen, let them deal with it.
Well,
I don't wanna keep nothing.
that's
back
where this
there. We
came
should
from.
be
This
able
is,
to
yeah, this is where,
Yeah, I know that's where it came from,
Yes,
but
Chad.
we're kicking the other one back.
Yeah, basically, the planning commission is acting in a recommending capacity on this text amendment. So you're making a recommendation to them on the question. They just initiated it. Under state law, there's three entities that can initiate a text amendment. A property owner, they can file an application. The planning commission itself, it could have started here, but then you would have come back and seen it again to officially consider it based on a legal ad in the paper and that sort of thing, or the board of aldermen, the governing authority. So they initiated it back in July, and so that's why it's before you this evening.
Mr. Miller got 1,000 flower pots in his front yard. What about just fall up in one of them? Remove them.
Could we put in this that, unattended, accessory building, constitutes a safety issue for people that is the purpose why we are doing this? Cause it does, that's the purpose, so there's no question as to why we're doing this.
so you want to amend this, that
Add to
this is becoming, that the reason we're adding wade pools and trampolines
Yes.
to the accessory uses due to safety concerns?
Yes, something to that effect.
So would you like for this to say, If you want to start after the comma where it says, except as provided herein, unattended swimming pools, including wading
Yes.
pools and trampolines, shall constitute accessory use?
Yes, something, yes. So there's a clear distinction as
All
to,
right, I'll amend my motion to say unattended.
so now they can come back and say they know the
Okay, so, and so, yes, Director Barr.
Let's not go that way, because then if a
can't?
house is unattended, that doesn't make it a principal land use, then what does it become? If the house is unattended?
How can we phrase it?
What do you mean by if the house is unattended? Like if nobody's
Well,
home,
to
or if the
u- to
house is
use-
abandoned?
To use that logic, if the wading pool or the trampoline was unattended, then it wouldn't be an accessory use. So I'm carrying that through, like if for the principal use, like in a residential district would be the house. So for some reason, let's say the house is unattended for a period of weeks or months or whatever, so would that mean that it wouldn't become a principal land use anymore? Because the house is unattended?
No, we're just.
Use the same logic?
No, it's not read like that, though. It's read to say that the reason for the thing is because it's a safety issue. That's why we're making this amendment. That's how I would read it. I mean,
But I'm just saying, I'm a little nervous about trying to rewrite this in any way different than this. I mean, either we're going to approve it or not, because when you start trying to rewrite it, then it's all about words. And then what constitutes unattended? Is it running in the house unattended, or does somebody have to be there the whole time? I mean, unsupervised, anything like that. I mean, 5 seconds running in. I mean, because we know that anybody can drown shortly. The whole purpose of this, from my understanding, is to get them into the backyard where it's secure, just like you would if you had a full-size swimming pool or anything like that, because the liability issues to everybody, and so if we're going to approve it, I think I believe that we should be looking at it to approve it as it's written, or we do not approve it and then let the alderman overrule our recommendation of denial. But I don't think we should try to reword any of these. We should either be approving what's written or denying it.
I think we ought to deny it and let it go back to them. This is getting to be like a police state. You can't have a little bitty swimming pool in your front yard.
yeah, we police what we want to police.
You know, you buy homes and you buy property to be able to use it to your use. Now we're a baby swimming pool, you gotta have a permit almost to get it? This is ridiculous. Send it back to the alderman, let them take care of it.
Well, in that case, I'm going to let my original motion stand and let the vote fall where it may.
All right, so the current motion is to approve as written. We have a second. Let's go ahead and do roll call.
Excuse me, Commissioner Egner,
Yes.
Commissioner Vidal,
Yes.
Commissioner Stokes,
Abstain.
Commissioner Kirkley. No. Commissioner Mercer,
No.
Commissioner McGann, no. We have 2 yeses, 3 noes, and 1 abstain. Motion is denied.
All right, so do we have a motion for the second part?
I recommend we return it to the alderman.
Clearer language.
Can this be returned to the alderman for better clarification on the fireworks section or not?
Yes, that's actually what you're doing, this is a recommendation to them of what the thoughts are from the perspectives of the planning commissioners.
What I'm saying is, do we have to make a motion to either approve or deny something, or do we just send, I mean, how do we, because if we deny this, then it goes back to them for them to either approve, or do we, because whose recommendation was it for the wording to be changed to professional? Was that actually the alderman, or was that staff that came up with the wording?
No, that came from the alderman.
Okay, so, but so how do we send it back to them for reconsideration of wording without being denied or approved?
Well, generally, my experience has been that, like, if a planning commission can't pass a motion, let's say it can't muster the votes to pass, then it's seen as basically a recommendation of denial because they couldn't
Okay,
pass it.
can I say something? You can easily take out that, and say every customer should be provided with a bag containing, such provision. You don't have to say professionally printed, you just say a bag. So you give them a bag with the information. You just need to get the information, you provide them with a bag, you know, what is a professional bag?
What they're supposed to be doing now anyway.
You know,
Again, do we have a motion for the fireworks section of the recommended text amendment?
I make a motion, we send it back to the alderman.
I'll second.
Well, we can't just send it back. We have to either make a motion to approve or deny what is written. So if you're going to send it back, you have to make a motion.
well, just deny.
We deny.
Deny and
Okay,
move.
so you're making this, okay, we got a motion to deny the text for the fireworks. We have a second. Any other discussion? All right, roll call, please.
Okay, this is for a motion to deny. Commissioner Egner,
Deny.
Commissioner Vidal,
Yes,
Commissioner Stokes,
Deny.
well, yes is deny, that was the motion.
Commissioner Kirkley,
Denied.
Commissioner Mercer,
Deny.
Commissioner McGann, deny. Motion passes to deny this.
Hope to see y'all next meeting.
All right, so we'll move on to our next case. Case number 2023-24, a variance, a request for a front yard setback variance for a proposed new building canopy from the required 50-foot down to 17.8 feet, thus a 32.2-foot variance request by Dale and Judy Wilson, landowner, and Mark Campbell Carter Engineering of Bogart, Georgia, applicant. The subject parcel is located at 4323 Goodman Road West and consists of 3.786 acres plus or minus. The subject parcel is currently zoned in a PUD or planned unit development. The Horn Lake Planning Commission would be acting in the capacity of a Board of Adjustment as authorized via City Code 24-20, and we will turn this over to our staff.
And I'll be doing this case. Next slide, please. So this is the same exact spot as the conditional use case, just south of Goodman Road. As was just stated, it's a PUD. Next slide, please. There's the zoning, C4 to the north, and subject parcels, PUD. Next slide, please. Just as before, we're going to treat it with C1 zoning because that's what DeSoto County had, and we're going to use the similar type of zoning, which Horn Lake has C1, so we're going to do the same. Next slide, please. All right, so the reason we're here for this one, it's just a technicality in the code. If you look at the building definition, Appendix A, zoning, Article 2, definitions, B, definitions, number 10, building says, any structure having a roof supported by columns or walls built for the support, shelter, or enclosure of persons, animals, chattels, or property of any kind, but not including any vehicle, trailer, with or without wheels, nor any movable device such as furniture, machinery, or equipment. There's no separate definition for a canopy of any kind, and any canopy is therefore considered to be a building when doing a literal interpretation of the definition for building, as any structure having a roof supported by columns for the shelter of persons. So that's why we're looking at this. Next slide, please. And then there's the setback line definition in Appendix A, zoning, Article 2, definitions, B, definitions. Number 14 says building setback line. A line delineating the minimum allowable distance between the street right-of-way and the front of the structure within which no building or other structure shall be placed. The minimum distance is prescribed by this ordinance. The building setback line is parallel to or concentric with the street right-of-way line. And next slide, please. So if you look in the C1 zoning, the setback requirements for the front is 50 feet, for the rear is 20 feet with footnote 13, and then for the side, there's no setback requirements for the sides. So if you look at footnote 13, it says rear yard requirement shall not include any required planting screen if abutting single-family residential zone. Next slide, please. So there's that same site plan sketch over the aerial view. Next slide, please. And so here's what we're actually looking at. In that box, there's going to be, that's showing where the canopy is going to be, and then those little double lines right there, that's the curb where this driveway, this drive-through driveway ends, and that little dip into the area right before the red circle, that's the right-of-way off of Goodman Road. And then inside that circle, it's showing 15 feet. So this canopy is going to be 15 feet from that right-of-way line. And so I'll read what it says there on the side. The canopy will be the closest structure to that right-of-way line at a distance of approximately 15 feet. And so even following this right here, this puts the canopy 50 feet from Goodman Road. However, if you just take a literal interpretation of this, the code requires this to be a distance of at least 50 feet, and this will require the canopy to be 85 feet from Goodman Road if you literally follow it the way it's written. And so that's just to paint a mental picture of how far that would be. Next slide, please. And so what that's going to do is essentially, you know, they design these things to where, you know, everything is functional and logical apart from what it's around. So if you were to follow the regulations on the front side, that would mean pushing it back. And what that's going to do is in that circle right there, that's showing 30 feet from the currently drawn parking to the lot lines of the residential houses to the south side. And so I'll read what I have on the side there. Chick-fil-A is offering to gain more space on the Goodman Road frontage by pushing the entire development closer to the residential lots behind it. The current development plan is drawn 30 feet from all residential lot lines. The requirement is 20 feet, but footnote 13 results in extra space needed. And so what that means is if you were to follow that exactly the way it's written, you would be pushing this whole development back closer to all these houses on the south side instead of having this green space with the shrubbery and coverings back there. So that's just to let you know what would happen if you were to follow it on the front side. Next slide, please. So Article 10 is applications. So this is just about the requirements for this general process. Where the strict application of the provisions of this ordinance would result in peculiar and exceptional practical difficulties to or exceptional hardship upon the owner of such property, the Planning Commission shall hold a public hearing on applications for variances from the terms of this ordinance and is empowered to grant approval of such variances from the strict application so as to relieve such difficulties or hardships. However, a variance from the terms of this ordinance shall not be granted unless the Planning Commission makes findings based upon evidence presented to it as follows. A, that special conditions and circumstances exist which are peculiar to the land, structure, or building involved, and which are not applicable to other lands, structures, or buildings in the same district. B, that literal interpretation of the provisions of this ordinance would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties in the same district under the terms of this ordinance. C, that special conditions and circumstances do not result from the actions of the applicant. D, that granting the variance requested will not confer on the applicant any special privilege that is denied by this ordinance to other land, structures, or buildings in the same district. So, Mark Campbell from Carter Engineering submitted a letter to the Planning Department addressing all 4 of these factors on August 14th, 2023, and these responses will be presented in later slides. Next slide, please. And then this is what the code says for additional regulations on variances. It says, number 2, a public hearing shall be held after giving at least 15 days notice of the hearings in an official newspaper specifying the time and place for said hearings. This was done. Number 3, the Planning Commission shall make findings that the requirements of paragraph 1 above have been met by the applicant for variance, that the variance is the minimum variance that will make the possible reasonable use of the land, building, or structure, and that the variance will be in harmony with the general purpose and intent of this ordinance. In granting a variance, the Planning Commission may prescribe appropriate conditions and safeguards in conformity with this ordinance. Violation of such conditions and safeguards, when made a part of the terms under which the variance is granted, shall be deemed a violation of this ordinance and punishable as provided under this article. Next slide, please. And number 4, under no circumstances shall the Planning Commission grant a variance to allow a use not permissible under the terms of this ordinance in the zone district involved, or any use expressly or by implication prohibited by the terms of this ordinance in said zone district. And so this use for a restaurant with a drive-through is interpreted to be permitted under the language of the PUD. So just throwing that in there. That'll be fine. Next slide, please. So here's what y'all are actually going to be reviewing. I have the applicant response and the staff analysis. And so, and this is just for the variance on allowing the setback to be that close to the right-of-way line. So letter A, that special conditions and circumstances exist which are peculiar to the land, structure, or building involved and which are not applicable to other lands, structures, or buildings in the same district. The applicant has said that the existing parcel has a peculiar shape along the Goodman Road frontage, which is not parallel to the roadway. The applicant is not aware of this condition existing on other adjacent property. The staff analysis was that the staff agrees that the parcel lines consist of a peculiar right-of-way line along Goodman Road, and that there does not appear to be a compelling reason for the irregular lines to be where they are. Next slide, please. And so evidence must be found to prove that B, the literal interpretation of the provisions of this ordinance would deprive the applicant of the rights commonly enjoyed by other properties in the same district under the terms of this ordinance. So the applicant response was that the literal interpretation of the front setback from this property line is that all structures must move even further from the Goodman Road travel lanes than other properties. So staff analysis was that staff does not agree that the literal interpretation of the provisions of this ordinance would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties in the same zoning district, which is that C1 zoning by DeSoto County, but which will be applied as City of Horn Lake C1 zoning, if you just do the literal interpretation of that. However, we do add that the staff does consider this canopy to be a new necessity for the unique operations of Chick-fil-A as compared to other restaurants with drive-thrus. And that's due to the unique case of all these Chick-fil-A's now having the employees come out and deliver the food to the people in the cars, which obviously puts them out in the weather. It puts them out in long hours, delivering these, whether it's, raining or snowing or 100 degrees outside. So that's why we did find it to be somewhat unique in this case. And as that is at pretty much every Chick-fil-A now, I have on there that, so it may be assumed to believe that the canopy is an inseparable part of the main structure. Next slide, please. And then we have C, that special conditions and circumstances do not result from the actions of the applicant. So the applicant response was that the proposed Chick-fil-A did not create the peculiar property boundary along Goodman Road, and that the staff analysis was that the staff agrees that the circumstance is due to the result of the irregular right-of-way line rather than the applicant creating the difficulty. Staff acknowledges that and then this is what I just talked about before also. Staff acknowledges that while canopies have not been historically provided by this company regularly in the far past, and not provided by others like it currently, it is being recognized as a necessity for the safety of the employees outside in the elements for extended periods of times, and thus must be included in the plans. The canopy is proposed to go in the most logical place possible for this development and should not be moved deeper into the property, as that would push it closer to the residential properties behind it. Next slide, please. And then the last one, we have letter D, evidence must be found to prove that granting the variance requested will not confer on the applicant any special privilege that is denied by this ordinance to other land structures or buildings in the same district. So the applicant response was that the granting of the variance requested would be necessary for other potential users of this property due to the abnormality of the frontage and does not confer any special privilege to Chick-fil-A. So the staff analysis was that staff believes that this will not confer any special privilege to Chick-fil-A based on different reasoning, which is that the apparent abundance of very similar uses of restaurants with drive-thrus on adjacent and nearby properties. And that concludes the presentation. The last slide is the possible motion.
All right, so do we have any questions for the staff? All right, would the applicant like to come up? Does anybody have any questions for the applicant that has been previously up here before?
I do. So, we approve this variance. You still meet the 20 feet rear requirement with footnote 13?
That's correct. So again, the property is peculiarly, it's hard for me to say. It's oddly shaped. And so, based on the functions, instead of asking for a variance to reduce the amount of landscaping along the residential side, which I didn't think was a good idea, I don't think anybody else did either, then the request for a variance, not for the principal building itself, but for the canopy, which I understand the difficulties of code, right? It's hard to keep up with some of the technologies, and as you demonstrated here tonight, writing code language to catch everything is not necessarily easy. So that's really the reason here is we want to maintain that landscaping along the rear and protect those residential properties. But as a result of that, and some of the peculiarities of the property shape along Goodman Road frontage specifically, we're requesting this front setback variance specifically for the canopy.
Any other questions? All right, do we have this is a public hearing. I'm going to open it up. Thank you. Yes, sir, come on.
I do request a 30-second warning. And 2030. Once again, my name is Francis J. Miller, 14 voting resident, Ward 5 in the city of Horn Lake. I remind the Planning Commission that a similar rear distance between a full-fledged building, not a canopy, on Highway 51 where that repair for fire trucks and that needed to build another building on the back of their lot, and there was trees there and a residential area there that was affected. And the planning commission, you guys granted it, the board of aldermen granted it, reduced that space so they could build that building, and it is already built, and it's there, and it's a building, not a canopy, and it was done because it made sense for that company, for the residents, and what they're doing, and it was a tremendous success. Chick-fil-A only wants to put a canopy there on a piece of property they have no control over, and they do not want to ruin the front, they do not want to ruin the back, they do not want to change any of the landscaping, but they need some help on that canopy, and you granted the variance on a building, grant this one on a canopy. It only makes sense.
Thank you.
If I could add one more thing, similarly, on the acreage of this one, it is the full 3.79 and not just the 2.71 as stated in the motion.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? All right, the public, anybody in the public else that want to talk? All right, the public hearing is closed. Do we have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Go ahead.
After review of case number 2023-24 VAR, the Planning Commission recommends approval of the request for a front yard setback variance for a proposed new building canopy from the required 50 feet to 15 feet. There's a 35 feet variance by Dale and Jody Wilson, landowner, and Mark Campbell with Carter Engineer, applicant, located at 4323 Goodman Road West, consisting of 3.79
7-9.
acres.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Commissioner McGann, yes. Commissioner Mercer,
Yes.
Commissioner Kirkley,
Yes.
Commissioner Stokes,
Yes.
Commissioner Vidal,
Yes.
Commissioner Egner.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, thank y'all. All right, on to other business. We have a comprehensive plan update?
Yes, thank you. I did want to, before you guys left or whatever, that, on the wording on that motion, it should be approval or denial. It's not a recommendation to the Board of Aldermen, so it's approved. That's why I'm taking that, your action tonight. So again, we apologize for that error. Going on to the comprehensive plan, we talked to Orion, the planning consultant group. Was it last week? Or was it the week before? Thank you. Okay, so, and they've fallen a bit behind, because originally, we thought they were gonna bring, the city, the draft plan, to the advisory group in the month of September, and obviously, we're almost all the way through September. So I think the current plan is they would bring it to the advisory group in the month of October, and so you may not see it actually before you, as a case for consideration and, recommendation to the board in either November or December. So,
Running a little tight.
well, it wouldn't have to be adopted yet this year. It could spill into next year. That's not a critical thing or whatever. It'd be nice if it did get approved this year, and we're assuming that they'll have various, once it does get approved, because it will have to be approved at some point by the city. There'll be various things to do to perform upon in that plan, and some will be like short-term changes, and some will be like intermediate things, and some things could be long-term things. So it'll create some tasks for the city to do, in those three time frames. So we're kind of disappointed by that, but it is what it is. So.
And then on to letter B, under other business, the other issues that's on the planning commissioner's mind. Do we have anything?
Yeah, that's just a new thing that we've kind of added, in case there was something. We're gonna start doing, studying like a cleanup of the zoning ordinance, because we know that there's some errors in there. There's some things that could be a little bit clearer, which would help code and what they do, code enforcement and what they do in the field as staff as well as what you do in your reviews of various cases and such. So we're going to start with that. But yeah, so kind of on that theme is if there's something that, since the Planning Commission can initiate different things. I mean, by state law, the Planning Commission does have they have the authority to spend money. You have the authority, we could actually pay you. I mean, the city could pay you, I think the state law is up to like $120 per month or per meeting or something like that. So, I mean, there's some things in the state law that are there.
To make a motion.
So, well, obviously that would still have to be approved by the.
So that comes to that has to come from the alderman.
Yeah, and plus they just approved the 24 fiscal year budget, so this wouldn't now be considered until August, September of next year or whatever. But I'm not suggesting one thing in any way or shape or form there. But I'm just saying there are some things that are enumerated in state law, and it's interesting when a person looks in the city code, because in that one text amendment I'd specified some things or whatever. It does specify things that a planning commission can do. So we thought, in light of us as staff, probably bringing some text amendment ideas to you, that maybe there was something that was already on your mind, either individually or collectively as a group, that, let's say you've read some part of the code or whatever, you don't understand it, or you just found some errors, or you just bring it to our attention or something like that. That would be helpful, or if there's something along those lines. That's kind of the idea there with this item B.
Okay.
So let me ask you this. I've looked up the code before on the city's website, and am I correct in that what is on there is actually the current code?
So are you talking about the city code?
Yes.
Yeah, as far as I know, as far as I can tell, as far as we know, we operate it as though it's the official, accurate thing or whatever.
You're using the same information that I'm using if I pull it up on their website.
Yes. And so what happens, like, let's say, like you considered in the case tonight, a text amendment, we take that recommendation, be to the Board of Aldermen on the October the 17th meeting on that Tuesday, and then whatever they approve, then we supply that to the company. It's called Muni Code. We actually, it's like a contract or an agreement with them, and they update the zoning ordinance as it's amended periodically during the course of a calendar year. So like go back to March, where the city, it was before you as far as the text amendments on the medical cannabis topic. So then the city adopted that in March. I think by the adopting resolution, it became effective in April. So now that's actually, if a person wanted to find that text amendment that changes, it's actually on the website now. And that was done by Muni Code. So what we do is we send them the changes, and they update the text, however simple or complex it may be.
Well, the reason I asked you that question is because when there was writing and the initiation of the rental ordinance, I'd gone on early on and read what they proposed, and then I'm pretty sure I went on after it was passed and read it again, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there's anything in that entire rental ordinance that addresses the tenant. So if the landlord stops paying the initiation fee or getting the inspection and loses his, quote, business license, what's the tenant supposed to do? Stop paying rent? I mean, he's still going to pay the rent to the landlord because he's going to be afraid to get kicked out if he doesn't. But the landlord's now operating out of bounds. So I think there ought to be something in there that protects the tenant, because this entire rental ordinance, in my opinion, should have been written and produced in order to protect the citizens of Horn Lake. Landlord might not even be a citizen of Horn Lake. But the person that lives in that house is a voting member, a tax-paying member. That's the person we ought to be concerned about.
Very good point. Yeah, I think most of the wording in the rental housing property act, let's see, the rental license, is it the rental licensing property act, is that it? There we go, RPLA, that's it, that's RPLA, okay. So I think it deals mostly, yes, with the actual landowner, whether that be an individual or a company or something like that. And there are some provisions that even though the company, if let's say they have several units or many units and they're operating out of state, wherever that would be,
Right.
they have to designate a local agent. And mainly we do that, why that's in there is so the city, if they need to take some type of legal or enforcement agent, we can contact that local contact person for that. So the problem we have now is we haven't got through the entire list. We're hoping to get that done between what we got from data from the utility department and then also from the county as far as what they deemed as commercial properties in the city of Horn Lake, which in that commercial properties list is the list of like apartment complexes or multiple units owned by a person. So we're trying to discern, go through those two lists so we have a good, fairly accurate, we'll probably never have a perfect sense of every rental property in town, but I think we can come reasonably close. But the way it's designed is that the enforcement would be against the landowner. And what we're hoping is that once we get through that and we get the set of letters that need to go out per the Rental Property Licensing Act, we can get the people that need to licensed up. Because there's a portion of people that are in that program, they've already licensed up. They're abiding by the city ordinance or whatever, that's great. But then we've got a certain percentage, we don't even know what that percentage is. Is it 20%, 30%, 70% that haven't licensed up yet? And so we're hoping to bring those into the fold. But this started way back at the beginning of the year. So once they get the letters, and we could take some action against that as a city or whatever, then hopefully we can get those companies and such licensed up as well. So, and then also it helps code enforcement in the field by quite a bit, because when they're out in the field, they know when they go to a property, if they checked our master list, once we've composed the master list, they can say, oh, this is a owner-occupied house or this is a rental unit. Because it matters to them because there's two different pathways of enforcement. Because the RPLA says, okay, if it's a rental unit, you go that way for enforcement, but if it's actually owner-occupied, you go another route. So it's very critical for code enforcement to be able to tell when they're in the field what kind of house, what kind of property is, whether it's rental or not. I mean, obviously sometimes it's obvious if it's a rental, if it's an apartment complex.
Is renting to own a rental?
Is renting a home a rent?
Renting to own.
I'd have to look at the individual language. So I probably knew that answer a year ago, but not so much right
I
now.
hear you, I'm right there. There is some wording in there. We even interpreted it as if, let's say there's a family. Let's say it's mom and dad, or grandma and grandpa, whatever it would be. They own a property. They live in their house, but they have a child that lives in another house that they own. But if there's no formal rental agreement, if there's no formal lease or whatever, even though there might have children living in a separate property, that second property does not have to be licensed. So that's the way we've been interpreting that per the language in the Rental Property Licensing Act.
Do we have anything else? All right, do we have a motion to adjourn?
I make the motion to adjourn.
Do we have a second?